Wapakoneta, Ohio, but I'm originally from Springfield, Ohio, born and raised. Married 30 years, I have 2 adult children, 6 really amazing grandchildren. In recovery from drug, alcohol addiction, and depression. Do a lot of volunteer work. I'm on disability, have been for about 10 years. So I mostly serve at like my local Celebrate Recovery, where I'm a part of there and sponsor some folks. Just started volunteering at a pregnancy resource center in our area. So just trying to get involved in some of those things, coming back off some health issues. So I'm just getting re-involved. Mm-hmm. So
very cool. Well, thanks so much for taking some time out of your busy life to join us to share a bit about your experience. Could you start off by sharing about your childhood?
A lot of fighting, different things between birth and like 12 years when my parents divorced. The most remarkable part of it, I think, is that on both sides of the family there was a lot of marijuana use and alcohol. And it wasn't traumatic, like I wasn't abused or neglected. I mean, you know, our needs were always met, but I realized somewhere around 4th, 5th grade that it was not normal behavior for your family to cut the pot at the dinner table. Hey. So that was a little bit of a shock when I found that out.
So when did you first start experimenting yourself with alcohol or drugs?
Alcohol probably first, which wasn't addictively until actually pretty recently. But I did the usual, like, you know, 20-something parties and drank and, you know, got drunk, did that sort of thing. I got married really early, and so I had a season not long after my kids were born where I was doing like the karaoke scene and hanging out with friends a lot more often than I should have been with my kids. But then I went to college when my kids started elementary school, so I kind of outgrew that.
Yeah.
But I was also right about then in the early phases of abusing opiates. So I remember the first time I figured out that opiates were great, and I had a dentist appointment. I was working a temporary job where I was an office manager's assistant. Took the day off, had a dental procedure, and I believe it was a 3-day prescription that was gone in 2 hours. My very first opiate use was addictive use. Part of mine became an issue, my drug use became an issue because I had a lot of health problems and really played the victim role really well because it got me lots of drugs. I did the whole opiate story where I doctor shopped and hospital hopped and, you know, went to different pharmacies and all of that. I got really skilled at telling a story good enough to get usually a pretty large prescription of medication. And I remember at night I would take, and I had at this point I think 4 back surgeries, and so at night I would take a muscle relaxer and a couple of other medications and different things, and kind of in the back of my mind I always knew that there's always this risk that I'm taking too much, but I'd always been okay, so I assumed I always would be. Mm-hmm. So then when I'd get up in the morning, that lethargy and the weakness and the stomach ache and all of the withdrawal was starting already. By then I was pretty much having to stay medicated around the clock. My tolerance was really high. So by the time I'd get up in the mornings, I was already getting dope sick. So reach for the nightstand, grab the bottle out of the drawer. I half the time didn't count them unless it was time that I was about to run out, and then I knew I needed to start counting them. Toss a handful back, get ready, go to work. A couple hours into my shift, a couple hours after that, and a couple hours after that, because I couldn't go more than a couple of hours at a time without taking something. And then start the nightly routine of downers, because for me opiates were like speed. They kept me going all day. I had lots of energy. But come bedtime, I couldn't sleep without the downers. I had lots of benzos at bedtime, lots of opiates in the morning and throughout the day.
Wow. And that's a dangerous combination.
It really was. Yeah.
for many years. So what happened that you decided, I got to do something different? Or did somebody else tell you, you got to do something different?
Kind of both.
Okay.
By then my use had become very public, because this was around the time I'd started stealing from people at my church, right from their houses and things like that. So that was when a lot of the consequences really started to become very noticeable, unmanageable. My relationships by then were starting to spiral out of control. And so it was about a year after that I finally checked myself into Glen Bay Hospital up in Ashtabula County. Rock Creek. Love them. Those people are fantastic.
They are. We were out there in June, and I am also a previous patient of Glen Bay as well. They do lots of good work out there.
They really do.
So what was your experience like in treatment?
It was a huge culture shock, for starters. I remember during my intake, probably the most scared I had been in my life up to that point. So right before I checked myself into treatment, I was on fentanyl and was prescribed the Duragesic patches. And I think I was on the 200 mic patches at the time, which is a very, very high dose of fentanyl. And I was chewing 3 and 4 of those a day.
Wow.
So by the time I got to treatment, I knew withdrawal was going to be a nightmare. And the reality is, opiate withdrawal won't kill you, but you will wish you were dead. And it was every bit as bad, and some days worse than I anticipated. So after I got through the first couple of weeks, I was really blessed to have a counselor that taught me more about myself than I think I understood. I didn't like a lot of it at first, because that's when I really had to come to terms with how manipulative I was. I keep using that word victim because, man, I was good at it. I was great at it, and I was incredibly skilled at being a victim, and I didn't know it. And every hint at any of those character defects in me from anyone in my life who had ever loved me and tried to hold me accountable to some of that stuff offended me to the degree that they were no longer in my life. So when she started talking to me about some of this stuff, and we started working through steps 1 and 2 while I was at the treatment center, to say that it was humbling would be a gross understatement. I had a lot to come to terms with. Part of it was because I was a Christian long before I was in active addiction, and so there was a lot of shame attached to ending up in active addiction in the first place. And at the same time knowing that my identity is really grounded in Christ, my relationship with Him. So I had this constant tug of war going on inside that was unbearable most of the time. Finally going to treatment was where I was able to put the pieces together that my identity is grounded in Christ, but just like He allows diabetes, He allows us to be medically addicts and alcoholics. It is literally a physical disease, the same as anything else that we treat with medication or doctors or other therapies, and mine has a specified course of treatment that has been proven to work, and it was absolutely more than acceptable that I follow that and be a Christian at the same time. I had a really hard time because I had tried church for years and I couldn't stay clean. So then I had switched and I'd started doing meetings and all this other stuff in the recovery environment for years, and I couldn't stay clean. When I got out of treatment and I got involved more in Celebrate Recovery and meant it, and was able to do it with a clear head and do it sober, I realized that it was the faith piece and the recovery piece that had to be molded together for me for sobriety to work. I could not separate one from the other. So working a program like Celebrate Recovery for me has been the difference. I absolutely love and support NA AA and the other fellowships. I was very heavily involved in those and still attend at times if I'm able to. But Celebrate Recovery has taught me how to take the 12 steps that have proven to treat addiction and the Bible and make the two make sense. Because I firmly believe that both are true and that the Bible is the ultimate truth, but I couldn't put that stuff into daily practice and stay sober. The 12 steps help me take what I know to be true about God and about Christ and my relationship with them and break it down into manageable pieces so that I can practically live it out in my life every day.
That's beautiful. Absolutely spectacular. And that's so exciting to hear you describe it and just resonate that freedom that you have found. That's really cool. So as part of the process of, finding yourself, rebuilding relationships, can you talk about some of the intangible and tangible gifts you've been given in recovery?
The biggest, the most important intangible gift for me is my relationship with God today. Tangibly, I have these beautiful little grandchildren that I can play with and touch and have a relationship with and enjoy. And I might not have even survived long enough to be alive to enjoy any of that. And like I said, my relationship with my kids is different today. My husband and I have had our struggles still ongoing, but we've been together 30 years and we still fight for each other. So in spite of all of it, I could go on about that part of it forever. There's the expression we use in recovery, don't quit till the miracle happens, or before the miracle happens, and that's really been true for me. And those are some of the biggest miracles, just relationships in general with God and with my family.
That's beautiful. So as a person who had multiple back surgeries and was medically prescribed painkillers for quite some time and developed an addiction as part of your treatment and whatnot, that fear of not taking them is, I'm sure, what kept it going for so long.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with physical pain today?
I have learned that removing the opiates actually altered my body's chemistry so that the pain, number one, is not what I thought it was. Opiates actually trigger pain chemicals in your brain so that your brain thinks if it doesn't tell you you're in pain, you're not going to medicate, and then you're on this hamster wheel you can't get off of. And I had to be taught that part too. So just getting the opiates out of my system was a big part of it. I do some alternative therapies like massage. I see a chiropractor when I need to. I have found that there are certain herbal remedies. If I get too stressed, then the muscles tighten up in my back and then I get a little more pain. So if I drink some chamomile tea, or there's a lot of things. I use a diffuser at bedtime sometimes when the pain keeps me from sleeping well or whatever, and so I learned a lot of that stuff.
I mean, that's really very cool. What did you learn from your addiction?
Oh wow, that'd be a whole other video. I learned that life was never meant to be lived alone. I learned that there are things more important than being comfortable, like relationships. I learned that I have worth and value. I learned that my identity is so much bigger than what I see in and of myself, because if that's all I'm looking at, my flaws define me, and then I start to spiral. I think I've learned to be a much better grandparent than I ever was a parent. I've learned to be patient with people because God and others have been patient with me through this process. I feel like I could honestly go on forever with that one.
Well, those were some great statements right there. Is there anything that we missed that you would like to share with the audience?
Just that one of my biggest struggles was chronic relapse. I had a couple years, would relapse maybe for a day, maybe for a week, and then I'd get a couple years, and then And the last time, let me do this differently. About 5 years ago, we had some life situations happen. And one of the things that Narcotics Anonymous talks a lot about is alcohol is a drug. And in fact, if you ask someone from NA, they'll call it liquid dope. And I didn't believe that, because I had always been able to, not always, but after my 20s and the partying phase was over, alcohol I could take or leave. I could go months and years and then maybe have a beer with dinner and then go months and years. So I took for granted that it would never be a problem. Several years ago, we started having some family crises happen, and my back started getting bad again. Different things just all kind of happened at one time, and it felt like things were just imploding. And so I couldn't sleep. And I started drinking a drink at night or 2 drinks at night, and it would help me sleep. And within a month, I was blackout drinking a 5th of whiskey a day, because the addict in me, I don't do anything halfway. Go big or go home. So I've had to work on my issues now with alcohol, and this is one of those areas where I had said that I've learned that I'm really capable of treating anything addictively. I'm really capable of using anything to medicate myself if I don't like how I'm feeling, inside or out. So I've had a lot of difficulty with the alcohol piece since then. I relapsed. I had a week last summer where I was drinking and went right back to Glen Bay. Now my sponsor and I, we argued about that for a minute, but I did. I went back to Glen Bay ultimately, and then I've been sober from alcohol 14 months this time. And so I've had a lot of trouble forgiving myself for the chronic relapse part, and for just the very fact that I am such an addict. And I want people to know that it doesn't matter how many times you have to do it, how many times you fall, you just keep getting up, you just keep trying. As long as you're trying, there's hope. And I know what the hopelessness is of not trying and doing nothing and letting the monster of addiction eat away at my soul. So just keep getting up.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your very full life and busy schedule to be able to share your story. It absolutely is going to help somebody who's out there who's struggling or in those early stages, seeing that recovery is possible, and life can be pretty grand.
Yes, it can.
Thank you.
Thank you.